Good to be here. So we're gonna begin. Again, this is a triggering lesson. We discuss a lot of violence, so make sure to take care of yourself. Okay, so our objective of this lesson is that you are going to be able to use evidence to explain how enslaved people resisted. How did people fight back? Our vocabulary word is the word resisted. You will hear me say this, and this means fighting back. And here's my image. Now you can draw any image on your handout to help you remember about this word. So let's review. So we know that the enslaved people came through the commercial of the Atlantic slave trade. They brought slaves into through this commercial legal system. So Europe traded merchandise with Africa. Africa people traded enslaved people with Europe. And then Europe after that would take take enslaved people to North America and South America, and this is where they will produce most of the goods that Europe wanted, right? Such as tobacco, sugar, cotton, would take it for commercial in Europe. And through the enslaved people, we have many white owners that became wealthy because of them. Now, the Middle Passage was the worst passage because in this Middle Passage you have a boat. So in this boat, as you can see, you have, and this is an actual image, a primary source where you see um how they put these slaves in storage, and they're all laying down and they're chained. And here is how it looks at the bottom. Not enough room to do anything, and they stayed this way for 3 months, maybe 4 months, depends on the weather. So as you can see, they didn't use the restroom. There was no way to stand up and stretch your legs. I can barely move. Like after 4 hours of driving, I need to take a break. These folks were not able to do that. They did not know any English. They didn't know where they were going. A lot of these folks were separated from their families, and once they arrived, their identities were changed. They were forced to change their first names and their last names. Mostly, their last names were given to them based on their owner's last names. Okay? So, checkpoint number 1. So, acts of resistance. So, when these enslaved people became slaves, they worked. They worked on these plantations. But some of you already asked, well, I can't believe they worked for so long. Like, how can they not resist? How can they obey people that were treating them horrible? Well, you were thinking ahead, and yes, enslaved people had acts of resistance. Not all of them were happy to be there. So, in order for them to disobey and to rebel, a lot of them escaped. Secondly, working slow was something that they did daily. Again, think about it. Their job is to produce. The more efficient you are in production, the wealthier you will make the owner. But for them, they were like, I don't think so. I'm going to work slow because I don't want to make you wealthy. And you're treating me horribly. So I'm going to take my time. A lot of them pretended that they were sick. They acted like they were sick so they wouldn't have to go to work. And then fourth, you had revolts, also known as uprising. That pretty much meant that when there were a small number of whites, slaves, and slaves outnumbered them, they would plan these revolts where they would fight back. And sometimes these revolts were planned. They were organized by a certain leader. All right. So please answer your checkpoint number 1. Okay. Here's a short video on the History Channel that talks about some types of resistance or rebellion that enslaved people did on plantations. As you're watching, please take notes on what forms of resistance happened, who were the leaders that planned these rebellions or revolts, and what were the consequences for resisting. So, just like kids, when kids misbehave, enslaved people, sorry, let me take it back. When kids misbehave, there's consequences, right? Same goes for enslaved people. When they would misbehave and they would get caught, there were serious consequences. So, what were those? I'm going to pause this section and go ahead and answer those questions on your notes. Okay, so as we see enslaved resistance happening, it becomes a way of survival, right? And I want us to make sure and understand that enslaved people were not happy to be there. They would find ways to organize to leave the way they were being treated, to leave the place. So here's a passage from a history book that talks about the ways these folks experience were. From the beginning, black men and women resisted their enslavement. Under the most difficult conditions, under pain of mutilation, that means violence, and death throughout their 200 years of enslavement in North America. These Afro Americans continued to rebel. Only occasionally was there an organized insurrection or rebellion. More often, they show their refusal to submit or to obey by running away. Even more often, they engage in damage, slowdowns, and subtle forms of resistance, and small forms of resistance, which maintained their humanity as human beings. So, this tells me that their way of escaping was because they knew they deserved better. They knew that the way they were being treated was extremely dehumanizing, and it was such a disrespect to their humanity. All right, so what you're going to do is you are going to pause right here, go to your checkpoint number 3, and answer those questions on your notes. I'm going to move on. For each passage, you are going to summarize those passages in your own words. That is your guided practice, okay? All right, that is it for today. Thank you.